Hello, everyone, and thanks for joining us today. My name is Elizabeth Pendergrass, and I'd like to welcome you all to today's webinar, Critical Cost and Schedule Target Setting with Data-Driven Estimation. Before we get started, I'd like to make you all aware of a few technical items. All of you who are listening to the presentation today are currently on mute. So to ask a question at any point during the presentation, just use the Q&A dialog box shown on the right-hand side of the WebEx screen. Keith will field as many of these questions as he has time for at the end of the presentation. If he doesn't have time to answer your question, don't worry. I will save all questions that we don't get to and refer them to Keith so he can get back to you. So I'll start by introducing our presenter today. Keith Ciocco has more than 30 years of experience working in sales and customer service, with 25 of those years spent at QSM. As Vice President, his primary responsibilities include supporting QSM clients with their estimation and measurement goals, managing business development and existing client relations. He has developed and directed the implementation of the sales and customer retention process within QSM, and has played a leading role in communicating the value of the QSM tools and services to professionals in the software development, engineering, and IT industries. So, without further delay, I'll let Keith get started.
Great. Thank you, Elizabeth. And excuse me, thanks everyone for attending today. Really appreciate your time and hope this webinar is helpful for you. So my plan is to take you through a brief slide presentation and to initially provide some background on QSM, and then to show some examples of how we use our tools to help with cost and schedule and quality types of target setting, and also to show some ways that we can use these tools to help improve communication and negotiation capabilities, both at the project and at the enterprise and delivery levels. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. Quick background on QSM, celebrating 43 years in business this year, and we're mostly known for being the developers of the SLIM suite of tools, which you're going to see today, or at least some of them. SLIM is an acronym for Software Lifecycle Management. And we're also a big research provider, and we use the research and the tools to help our clients improve their planning and negotiating capability on their projects and their portfolio development. So that's kind of our main focus. The research actually comes from mainly from the QSM industry database. It's got over 13,000 completed projects, and it basically provides the latest information on cost and schedule and effort and quality on completed projects or completed deliverables or completed project increments, however you would define the work that you're doing. And so studying all this data gives us a good understanding of really the fundamental relationships from project to project. This is actually what we call the software production equation. It's also known as the Putnam model. So Larry Putnam Sr. actually developed these models initially, and he was actually the founder of QSM. And what we're really looking at here is what we're doing is we're linking the amount of effort and time that it takes to deliver the value for our clients, right? So the value delivered is linking to the time and effort it takes to deliver it, in addition to the level of productivity that it takes to deliver that work or that value or that functionality. And this is the basic model, and it's really the cornerstone of the tools that you're going to see today. And also really the reason that we can be so flexible in solving all these different types of estimation problems in software and technology development. And we're going to probably refer back to this equation a little bit during the webinar. So I kind of wanted to show you it here at a summary level. Benefits to data-driven estimation. Number one, and that's what we're going to be talking about today, data-driven estimation and how it can help us do a better job of setting our targets, right, and negotiating those targets. So benefit number one is it helps us get the conversation started. Number two, it helps us save a lot of money and time because it gives us the ability to improve those cost and schedule targets that we so often have to sign up for, right? Early on in with those early decisions, we want to get those targets and those goals correct so we don't lose money in the long run. And so we keep our clients happy with the deliverable for the quality and the cost and the schedule. Number three, it helps to improve the communication. The data-driven estimation helps us improve communication between the management and the stakeholders. And number four, it helps us improve our negotiating capability. So what I'd like to do before I really get into it is actually have a polling question. And that way we can kind of get everybody involved a little bit to start. You'll approximately have 1 minute to answer the question. And the question is, how do you currently establish your development and your delivery targets? You'll see a polling dialog box pop up, and you can choose as many answers as you would like that you think apply. And we'll go ahead and give about a minute for your answers, and then we'll talk about it. Got about 30 more seconds. Okay, time's up. And we should see the answers here shortly. Okay, still waiting. There we go. Okay, there we go. There are your answers. And wow, okay, great. So in case you can't see the dialogue, I'm pretty sure you can see it, but it looks like most of you chose data-driven estimation as the way that you all set your targets, which is great, actually. That was the most popular answer. Task level planning. So data-driven estimation was 59% of the answers. 55% of you chose task level planning. 34% chose experience-based. 21% chose gut feel. So that's really interesting, actually, that most of you chose data-driven estimation. That's actually great because that's what we're going to talk about today, as you know. And we find that a lot of project managers actually struggle with the early planning. And so anything we can do to help improve that process is really helpful. One of the things we recommend is the data-driven estimation. And since it allows you to have a way to negotiate your numbers early in the planning process. The data part of this helps us avoid committing to something that's unrealistic. So I'm really happy that most of you all chose data-driven estimation. So most of you all will be pretty familiar with some of the things that I'm going to talk about today. The data part is especially helpful, and we're going to show some examples of when we need to leverage that data to, like if stakeholders are pushing back on the targets that we set. If we have some data-driven numbers to show them, it helps us with the negotiation, and it helps kind of keep everybody on the same page early, helps keep everybody happy, right, early in the planning process. So that's really interesting. I really appreciate those responses. Thank you again for providing those answers. Really appreciate the feedback. We're going to continue to talk about this as we go through and show some examples of how we use the data-driven estimating to help ourselves with the early planning. But that was really interesting that most of you chose data-driven estimation. Speaking of negotiating and using that data to help us negotiate, this is actually a scatter plot from the QSM industry database. And you can see kind of a cluster of the data here from that database. And you can see kind of a relationship here. You can see time on the vertical and size on the horizontal. And so this is basically saying as the projects get larger, they take longer, right? Pretty simple relationship. And then in red letters, we have what we call the impossible zone. And this, unfortunately, the impossible zone is what a lot of software and technology development managers sign up to. because oftentimes they don't use a data-driven estimate. They might use some other method like gut feel, or maybe they're being forced into a schedule or a budget, something like that. So by using the historical data and some modeling types of estimating tools, we can usually avoid signing up to these kind of crazy targets early in the planning process. And that's what we're going to show some examples of today. And the examples that are going to come from are actually our slim suite of tools. And so we're going to be showing some examples from these tools today on how we help our clients set these targets and maybe negotiate a little bit more effectively, and also maybe manage that uncertainty that often comes with the early planning. I'll give you a quick summary of these just so we understand what we're going to show today. Slim Estimate is our tool for running those estimates for cost and schedule and quality, and being able to manage the risk on those projects and on those early decisions. It comes with the Slim Data Manager. The Data Manager gives us a place to capture all that historical data. It's our repository tool, right? It would be, if you're a client, it's your repository tool for capturing your historical data. We have Slim Master Plan for estimating at the portfolio level. We have Slim Control for tracking and oversight. So once we either win the business, we're doing the proposal, we win the business, or we've decided on a go or no go decision, we're moving forward with the project. Slim Control allows us to look at plans and actuals and actually re-estimate as things change during the project or the deliverable. Slim Metrics is for process improvement type of analysis. So it lets us see if where the bottlenecks might be, if there are any, or where are the strengths, where are the weaknesses within the organization. How does one project compare to another? And how do all of our projects compare to industry data? Are we competitive? Where can we improve? That's kind of a summary of the Slim suite of tools, the desktop version. And then we also have Slim Collaborate, which is our cloud-based software as a service tool. And it basically covers the estimating capabilities that I just mentioned. So it's our cloud-based estimation tool, and that's what we're going to mainly focus on today, Slim Collaborate. So I'm going to go ahead and just pause again for some questions, and we're going to allow for questions at the end as well, but I thought I might answer if there are any right now before I jump into the details, if I had any high-level questions before we get started.
And just to remind you all, just use that Q&A dialog box just to type in any questions. And if there's anything you are confused about so far, you can just use that there. So far, I just have one, and that was, can these tools apply to cloud migrations?
Yes, absolutely. So these tools can apply to cloud migrations, microservices, software and application development, really any type of development or design process. So answer is a strong yes on that. And thank you for the one question. So I will go ahead and continue here. Actually,
I think I have one more.
Okay.
What is being used to get the relative size of a project?
That's a great question. We're going to show some examples of that today. So what you want to know, where are we getting the sizing? That would be based on whatever the client, whatever you all determine is, how you want to measure the work that you're delivering, or the value that you're delivering, or the functionality. So that could be features, it could be user stories, it could be high-level business requirements. So what determines it would be the user, who's ever managing the project. And then you can customize these tools for whatever size measure that you feel comfortable with, or multiple size measures together. And we're going to show some examples of that, actually. But sizing is actually one of the biggest challenges that people face, and we have some nice ways in our tools to help model those types of challenges. I hope I answered that okay. By the way, once this is over, feel free to reach out to me. I'm happy to answer more questions. I'm happy to provide. We can schedule demos or set up a call. Pretty flexible on that. So let me know if you'd like to meet afterwards.
Oh, one more question before
Okay.
you continue.
Great, love questions.
How much data do you have in your portfolio in relation to digital transformation? And this could also be in relation, this could be in regards to the QSM database.
I mean, yeah, absolutely. We have thousands of projects in the QSM database that relate to any type of engineering, development, transformation, and that can encompass all different types of technologies, whether it's cloud or like I said, microservices, application development. So thousands of projects that deal with transformation types of programs. Okay, hope I answered that. Any more questions, or happy to continue?
Yes, I actually have one more.
Okay.
And then we can let you continue, and then we
Okay.
can get to more questions at the end. These are great. Just keep putting them in, and I'll hold on to them for at the end. So can you use this tool with Agile projects?
Yes, absolutely. These can be configured for Agile. It can be configured for more traditional types as well, like waterfall. And a lot of our clients are doing Agile, and a lot of our clients are doing something in between, right? Between Agile and waterfall, kind of a hybrid. So the answer is yes, fully support Agile, as well as all the other types of software methodologies. Yep, absolutely. In fact, a lot of the methodologies and ideas that Agile promotes, like smaller scope deliverables and smaller team sizes, are things that we see are beneficial in the data that we do research on. So we do a lot of benchmarking and studying of all the project data, and a lot of the projects in our database are Agile projects. So, yeah, absolutely. So, was that the last question for now, Elizabeth?
Yes.
Okay, sounds great. And then at the end, we'll leave a few minutes for more questions. Okay, so what we're looking at here is Slim Collaborate. And again, this is our cloud-based estimation tool, or software as a service, as it might be defined. And you can see here that this could actually be your website or your web instance with your projects loaded in. You can see here that we've got the ability to set up different preferences like email notifications, and we can set up usernames and passwords and things like that. And you can actually set this up the way you would like it with your website name and with the people that you want to access all of your data. We have a full back office where we can set up and configure different templates for all different types of life cycles. And if I scroll down a little bit and look to the center bottom here, you can see a project list. And these could be all of your projects, either that have yet to be estimated or that have completed, or projects that have been completed, estimated, and actually delivered. So this is fully configurable, and you can see here, if I go to choose filter, I can actually access some of the filters that I've set up. And you can see I've got estimates that need to be approved, estimates that are already approved, estimates that need changes. I've got projects that have been complete, not only estimated, but have actually been delivered and completed. I've got Agile projects, waterfall, cybersecurity, data warehouse, microservices, whatever, however you want to set this up. This would be, or you could be your centralized database for your projects or your deliverables or your program increments, however you want to define the work. And in this example, you are looking at my projects that have been completed. And these are actually CRM types of projects. And you can see we're calling them closeouts because they have been completed. And, so really, what we encourage is for our clients to capture their own historical data. But it's okay if you don't have any historical data, right? I know a lot of people in the audience are actually people that do proposals, maybe for the federal government, maybe for the commercial sector. And that's totally fine. A lot of times we're trying to win new business and we don't have any historical data. And that's one of the actual sweet spots of our tools is we can use the industry data and the models that are built into Slim to help us generate reliable estimates using QSM's historical data and using the models that are built in. And also we can use these models to manage that early risk when we're not really sure about how we should price out the system, right? So we're going to show examples of all this. But before we start showing examples of setting our targets, right, and using the estimates to do that, I just wanted to spend a little bit of time on the historical data part because eventually it's a good thing to do even if you're not doing it now. So I'm going to show some examples of some historical data, and then later I'm going to show how we use that to set the targets. and to also mitigate the risk, the planning risk that we go through sometimes. So these, again, are projects that have been completed. And if I go to the portfolio dashboard here, I'm actually going to analyze that data. So I've got all these analytics that come up on my projects that have been completed. And you can see here, I've got all these dashboards that I can pull up. First dashboard that we're looking at is, you can see, 4 charts. The one on the top left is a portfolio timeline. So I can see when each of these projects was started and completed. And I'm saying project, but this, again, I know with the agile folks, sometimes they like to call it something different, like deliverable or program increment, however you want to define it. So this is when each deliverable began and ended. I've got my dollars per month that were spent. Again, these are projects that have been completed. This is my portfolio of projects. I've got my staffing, full-time equivalent per month over the years. I've got my cumulative cost over the years as well. So how much have I spent the last 4 or 5 years on my projects? So it kind of gives me a kind of a bird's eye view of what's happened so far in my portfolio. Can look at the data in lots of different ways. So in this example here, we're looking at some pie charts, and I can say, okay, wow, I had this many projects in this particular year. I had this many projects in this particular year. I can see what industry I was mainly focused on. This particular client was focused mainly on financial systems or financial applications. Their primary language was Java and JavaScript. You can see they spent most of their time on major enhancements and minor enhancements. We had some new development. The quality of this data, I considered it high level of quality on most of the projects, moderate level on the rest. And then most of these projects were actually fit into the agile or lean category. Okay, so kind of a way to look at the data at kind of a bird's eye view once everything is completed. And then I can also look at some time-based performance trends. So here I'm looking at, again, this is historical data. Here I'm looking at our productivity index over the years. And we're going to talk more about this productivity index measure, but in summary right now, I'll just say that it's a macro measure for productivity and efficiency. And if you're running our QSM tools, you'll have a productivity index assigned to every one of your deliverables or projects. And it really takes into account the overall project environment that you're working in, and it's an objective quantitative measure that's calculated based on historical data. The higher this number, the better. It takes into account things like experience level of the people that were on that project, complexity of the software or the complexity of the work that you had to deliver, tools and methods you might have been using, maturity level of the process that you're working in, things like that. The beauty of it is it's calculated mathematically. So we're going to talk more about it in a minute, but you can see this particular client had higher productivity in 2016 than all the rest of the years. And it just so happens that they actually spent the most money that year as well. See the total effort here, right, by year. Our staffing was also higher that year, and then we actually delivered more work in that same year. So if I'm an analyst in this company, I'm a project manager or I'm a vice president of development, I might want to go back and look at some of the details of why that happened that way. Why was our most productive year also the year that we actually delivered the most work? Did we have the more experienced teams working on that work? How did the staffing profiles work? How did that save us money? Things like that. Okay, so just another way to kind of look at the historical data. And then my favorite view is looking at the historical data compared to industry trend lines and also custom trend lines. So here again, we're looking at key measures, key metrics. We're looking at duration, and we're looking at effort. We're looking at that productivity index. We're looking at staffing. And you can see here on the duration, each one of these gold data points is a project that's been completed. And you can see how it matches up to the trend line that we've got. Now, this could be a custom trend line for your particular company, right? An internal custom trend line, or it can be an industry average, right? And so we can compare our projects to people that are in our market space that we're competitive with, all built into these types of tools here. Okay, so you can see here, we're looking at completed projects compared to either industry trend lines or our own custom trend line. Now, those were kind of some high-level views of historical data. And again, we're going to show some ways that we're going to leverage that to help us set those critical targets and manage that risk early. But before I do that, again, I'm just going to go a little bit deeper and open up one of these projects that's been completed. And I had been logged out, so I'm going to go back in here. And I'm going to go back to my project list, and we're going to open up one of these projects. And we're going to go into a little more detail just to show you the kind of deep history you'd like, which we encourage you to capture. Kind of a best practice is we want to be able to capture, how long the project took. And here you can see I've done that. This project started in January and ended in December, so about 12 months. We want to capture the total effort. You can see here we've done that, and we've actually broken it out by phase here as well, the total effort, total defects that were at delivery time, and the total functionality delivered, or total value that we delivered. Here it was 465 story points. Now, if you remember that one slide I showed, that software production equation, those are those key measures, right? And that's what we're capturing here. We're capturing how much work size, how much effort was spent, how much duration elapsed, so we can calculate that productivity index. So here I've captured those three measures, and then when I hit OK, it's going to bring me here, and it's going to calculate that productivity index for that particular project. It's telling me here that we achieved an 18.8 productivity index, okay, which is pretty average for a business application, all right? If I look to my left, I can see that we can also see how our effort on this particular one project compares to industry or our own custom trend line. And then we can see how it compares staffing-wise. Did we staff this competitively? If I scroll down a little bit, we've got another way to look at the data. We call these 5-star reports. 5 stars being your top 10% in the industry. Okay, and this particular project performed pretty well. It performed at about 3 stars, which was about top 40 to 50% in the industry. So overall, this project did pretty well. Now, wanted to show you a little bit of the history. Now we're going to get into the kind of the core part of the demo now, or the webinar. I'm going to show how we leverage this historical data to help us improve our estimating. And let me also just stress one more time that if you don't have any historical data, that's okay. There are no prerequisites to using these tools, right? We can work with what you have. And again, a lot of the people that use these tools are doing proposals, and they're trying to make very early decisions on new business, and they don't have any historical data. So that's kind of part of the value proposition of these tools is we're going to use the industry data, and we're going to use the models that are built in to manage that risk and uncertainty and putting buffer into our decisions, things like that. I'm going to show you some examples now. So I'm going to go to this project list. Again, these were projects that were completed. Go back to the filter. Let's bring in our estimates that we've got here pending. Okay. So these are our Agile estimates. Someone asked about Agile earlier in the webinar, right? Do we support Agile? So I figure I'll bring up that set of projects here. But again, we could be supporting whatever type of methodology in software or technology development that you're working in, whether it's microservices or cloud or application development, infrastructure development, things like that. But let's just go ahead and take a bird's eye view of this data first before we get into detail. So these are all estimates in my portfolio. I'm going to go to the dashboard here, and I'm going to actually bring up an estimate for the whole portfolio. So one way we can use that historical data that I showed a few minutes ago is to estimate and plan what we're going to spend next year. How are we going to, what are we going to spend in our budget? Do we have the capacity to fulfill the demand that's pending, right? And you can see here that, again, these are all estimates, or mostly estimates, for my portfolio. You can see here we're breaking these out by program increment, like we like to do in Agile. We've got a dollars per month estimate for the whole portfolio, broken out over the year, over 1 year, or two, actually at 1 year. And then I've got staffing full-time equivalent per month, and I've got my cumulative costs. So how much am I going to need to spend next year? Now, this could be for annual budgeting purposes, or it could be, I've got 5 or 6 proposals in my budget or in my portfolio. I've got 5 or 6 proposals that I'm working on. Or it might be, I could be doing a proposal, but I could also be a customer evaluating vendor proposals. I could be on the other side, and I've got vendors telling me, here's how much this is going to cost and how long it's going to take. And I'm going to use these tools to evaluate whether those bids are realistic. Okay, so we can work on both with both groups. But this is an example of a portfolio estimate based on historical data. I've got multiple projects, cost, schedule, effort, staffing. Okay, now let's go a little deeper and start working on the targets that I mentioned. I'm going to open one of these project estimates up, and we want to be able to establish realistic targets early in the planning process, so we deliver something that's quality level to our client within the right cost that we had promised, right, and the right schedule that we had promised. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go over here and show you an example of actually how to set one of these estimates up. And first thing we're going to do is configure the template based on the type of project I'm about to estimate. So we'll give the project a name. Here it's a program increment. Just calling it auto program increment. And then I'm going to set up the workflow status. So for example, where is this estimate in relation to our planning process? Is this an estimate that's ready for review? Is it a project that needs an estimate? Is it something that's already been approved, right? And then you remember with Slim Collaborate, the tool I'm showing you here, we can set up email notifications so everybody's on the same page early. And so all the stakeholders are in line with what the decisions are, the stakeholders that you choose to have be part of the decision-making process. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to choose a trend group. These are all knowledge bases from that QSM industry database that I mentioned. Okay, and you can see here it's broken out by all different types of application domains. Okay, and when I click on one of these, what happens is it brings in the typical cost and schedule and effort and quality numbers for this type of project. Right, so if I don't have any of my own historical data, if I'm trying to make some early decisions, I'm trying to win business, I'm trying to do a proposal, I can use industry data to help me be competitive with my price quote. Okay, so I'm going to bring in the knowledge base that's relevant to the proposal that I'm working on or the early decision. If I'm not doing proposals, that's okay too. If I've just got an early decision, I'm an internal application development manager, I've got to see, what should this cost? How long should it take? Same thing. I'm going to bring in the knowledge bases that are relevant. I'm going to bring in the labor rates that I want to use, and that can be one overall labor rate for the overall program, or it can be multiple labor rates broken out by skill category or by role. I'm going to go ahead and customize the phases that are in my project or my deliverable. You can see here I've got concept and planning, I've got requirements and design, I've got development, I've got post-development support. This can all be configured, can have different names here. I'm going to decide how do I want to allocate my resources in this estimate. Do I typically, if I have 20 people, do they all go from start to finish, 20 from start to finish, or do I gradually add people on and then take people off? So I'm going to set up the model that best shows or best customizes to how I allocate my resources. I'm going to pull in these configuration sets. So I'm basically going to tailor this estimate to my project environment, my phase names, milestones, reliability information. So you can see here, I've got a whole host of options. It can be, for the DoD, it can be a package implementation, it can be hardware design or development, it can be agile, waterfall. So whatever type of life cycle you're working in, we can configure this as long as it's a technology development type of process that you're working in. And then reliability, right? Not only do we want to deliver on time and within budget, but we want to make sure the system is delivered at a high level of quality. So we're going to set up the parameters here that we're comfortable with, like the software needs to work 8 hours without discovering a critical defect. Or, it's got to work a certain number of days a week, things like that, without discovering a critical defect or a cosmetic defect or a moderate defect, however you want to set it up. The QSM tools have reliability models built in, which reflects this tuning factor here, this defect tuning factor that's set at 100%, meaning it's set right now to the QSM reliability model. This can be tuned up or down based on your historical data, okay? So we're going to set this up based on your project environment. And then I'm going to go ahead and generate my estimates. I'm going to go ahead and generate the estimates for the targets that I'm looking for. We've got multiple options to deal with this, okay? The first option I'm going to talk about is the feasibility option, because that's usually used by our clients that do proposals. We have a lot, in fact, I think we have some clients on today that do a lot of federal type of work. So this would be one option that you could start your estimate to do the pricing that you're trying to complete, right? That you want to propose to your client, try to win the business. And you can see here, I've actually set up some targets. This particular client needs 25 epics delivered, and they need it done in 6 months. And we've got 8 people to work on it. Okay, those are our targets that we're hoping for in this example. Of course, it's flexible. I can set this up however I want. Maybe I'm not just dealing with a staffing target. I'm looking at a cost that I have to hit. Maybe it's fixed price, right? Maybe it's a certain number of person hours that I'm dealing with. So we can set our targets here to be competitive. Now, I've got 25 epics here, but this is flexible as well. I can define, somebody asked about sizing earlier. I can define the functionality or value that I'm delivering however I would like, whatever fits in my particular project environment, whatever I'm comfortable with, whatever I can do consistently. So I've got this other area of the tool that I can go into a lot more detail. And you can see here, we're actually using business use cases and interfaces, right? And we're marrying that up to number of total epics. But, you know, I'm flexible. I can set this up for whatever type of sizing mechanism that I need. So, for example, maybe I'm doing a package implementation. So now I'm looking at something different, right? I'm counting, you know, reports and interfaces and conversions and things like that, and I'm breaking them out by complexity. Or maybe I'm doing a data warehouse type of system. That's what I'm proposing. So instead of features or user stories, here I'm looking at interfaces, transformations, data structures, things like that. And QSM can help you set this up, right? So our support's included, so we could help you create a template, and we can help you with your estimates if you'd like. Okay, so sizing is something that we can help you with, but a lot of times we don't have that level of detail. We're doing a proposal, and the RFP came out and said, look, this customer needs this at a high level. So we're going to go ahead and just put in 25 epics in this example. Okay, 6 months, 8 people. All right. Now, before I move forward with this estimate, let me just show you a couple other quick things here. I can also approach the estimate if I don't have this level of information. We call this a trend-based method. So let's say I don't have a specific target that I'm working to for cost and schedule. All I know is what the customer needs functionality-wise. So I'm just going to put in how many epics we need to deliver, and then I'm going to let the QSM models figure out how much it's going to cost and how long it's going to take and how much effort is going to need to be spent. Okay. Another option might be our design to goal option, where we know what our productivity index has been in the past. We know our historical data. We know that, or we know what the industry data says. We know that typically on this type of project, 19 to 20 is typical on that productivity scale. And we know how many people we have, and we know how much functionality we need to deliver. Okay, that's just another option. Remember that software production equation I showed earlier? That production equation can be adjusted based on the problem you're trying to solve. Okay, and that's what we're doing here. We're looking at the estimate based on the information that you might have available. And then we have a time box example. This is really popular with our agile clients. Okay, a lot of times they have a fixed price and they have a fixed schedule, right? So we're going to put in what their fixed schedule is and what their fixed price is, or their fixed number of people. Can do either here. And then we're going to let the QSM tools figure out how much functionality can be delivered, right? And this productivity index came from my historical data. It's based on the most recent agile projects. Okay, so the Slim Collaborate QSM tool here will figure out how much functionality can be delivered within those fixed parameters, and it'll be able to determine whether those parameters are realistic or not. Okay, so multiple examples there. Let's go back to the initial one, the feasibility, high level. I'm doing a proposal, or I'm making an early decision. Doesn't have to be a proposal. Time, number of people, work delivered. I hit OK, and it runs the estimate for me. okay? And it's going to tell me what targets are reasonable and what targets are not. So let's look at this dashboard here for a second. So you can see here that in the gold, that was my initial target. That's what I was hoping for. I was hoping to use about 10 to 12 people on this particular deliverable. QSM is saying, hey, you know what? You're going to need more people on this. You're going to actually need close to 20 people to deliver this on time and within budget and to be competitive. Okay. Now, a lot of times, this is in this particular example, a lot of times it'll be the opposite, right? Sometimes, a lot of companies will overstaff, and then the QSM tools will say, hey, look, you're overstaffing this. Let's save yourselves some money and let's use a smaller team, right? But in this example, this particular estimate, it's actually saying we need to budget for a few more people. You can see here on the chart, I've got my in gold were my targets that I was hoping for. I was hoping for 6 months, 8,200 person hours to deliver the 25 epics. QSM is saying, based on the models and based on the historical data, that I need to allow for a little bit more time, a lot more effort, and a few more people as well. Okay. And then if I scroll down, you can see my estimate again in gold. You can it's telling me that my effort estimate is moderately risky. It's within the standard deviation of the industry trend. You can see this trend line here would be the industry average. Again, we're using this for a competitive edge, right? We're using industry data to say, hey, is this proposal going to be competitive before I make a decision to go forward with it? And then you can see what QSM recommends. It's recommending in this example to allow for a little more time and effort. And then the pricing, right? For pricing managers that are listening, I was hoping to be competitive and maybe lowball this, but QSM is saying, based on the historical data, it's going to cost me a lot more money to deliver. And I need to know this early. And this is going to save me a lot of money if I know this early, because if I'm down here, it's going to be one frustrated customer later on in the process, right? So this is one example. These are our targets. The target I was hoping for in gold, the target QSM is saying would be more realistic. Let's look at some contingency planning now. If I go to this option over here, we can actually look at some contingency plans. So if I look at the cumulative effort chart here, you can see in gold, which is my estimate. And this could be the 50% estimate right out of the box. I don't have any historical data. And then the gray region there is allowing me for some buffer, right? So I'm saying here, give me the schedule and the budget that I've got an 80% chance of achieving, or give me the schedule and the budget that I've got a 90% chance of achieving, high assurance. So I have my project is much more likely going to be in this range than in this range. So I can manage it to this effectively now that I know this information. I know that this is probably not going to be enough resources to deliver this. I'm probably going to need to be more up in this range. Same with cost, allowing myself a higher price here. Same with staffing, a few more people. Okay, and then if I look to the top left chart here, I've got this effort probability chart, which gives me kind of a bigger picture saying, okay, wow, got a great chance if we're budgeting 16,000 person hours, that's looking pretty good, about a 99% shot. If there's someone's trying to force me down here, not looking good. So I can use this data now to negotiate. If someone's pushing me down here, I can say, look, based on the historical data, we've never achieved that before. I don't want to sign up to that because it's going to be a deal where we lose money or we lose time or we lose quality. I don't want to sign up to this if I only have a 10 to 20% chance of achieving it. Now, lots of other analytics here I can look at. If I wanted to compare, let's say I want to compare my estimate with the QSM estimate, right? Based on the QSM historical data, I can say, or this could be based on my historical data, right? Maybe somebody did an estimate and they didn't use any data, or maybe they did use SLIM, but QSM saying, hey, we need to take a second look at this based on the most recent industry data. So here we've got, for duration, I was hoping for 6 months. QSM is saying, hey, we probably need to allow it for a couple more months. Same with the cost, right? Like we already talked about. We're just looking at it in a different form now. We're looking at bar charts. Bar charts are great if I'm trying to pitch to senior management or if I'm trying to communicate with a client, right? Mean time to defect. Okay, this is important. Not only do we want to finish on time within budget, but we want the software to work well when we deliver it. Based on my numbers, my targets, we were going to have a mean time to defect at delivery of a little bit less than a day. QSM is saying, hey, based on the historical data, the quality is actually going to be a little less than I was hoping for, 0.6, right? Mean time to defect, 0.6 of a day. And then I actually can look at total. I can look at other measures as well. I can quickly pull up other data analytics and say, okay, this at delivery, we're going to be. I was thinking that we'd be around 60, 65 defects. QSM saying you're going to be a lot more than that, right? Red flag. And then our productivity index. I actually gave myself too much credit here. I gave myself a productivity index of a 21.9. The QSM historical data is telling me, hey, based on the history, I've never achieved that high. I'm really going to be in the 19 to 20 range. So it's a little bit high for me. I should probably be counting on more of a 19 to 20 range on productivity. And then we can go more detailed as well on our targets. We can say, okay, right. So far we've talked a little bit about, is this going to be 6 months or 12 months? Do we need 10 people or 20? Now we're going to set our targets at a more granular level. This is all built in. So when I generated those initial estimates, it also broke the estimates out for me at a detail level. So I can see how much money I'm going to spend by role by month. So the first chart on the left here actually breaks it out by staffing. You can see here the developers, the QA, the technical analysts, the scrum masters. How much are we, how many people are we going to need? You can see 8 to 10 developers, right? How much effort are we going to spend by role by month? You can see here the developers, we need to budget about 2,100 person hours. We've got dollars per month, and we've got our cumulative cost. Not for those pricing managers, not only do we figure out what's the overall proposal do we need to bid, but also what are we going to spend at the lower level, at the granular level. And then, we can go back to the macro as well. Here's a quick assessment of that particular estimate. This was my target again, right? 12 people. I was hoping to finish in here, right? About 6 months. And this is the industry data, this trend line. It's showing me I'm kind of pretty close, pretty competitive there at my schedule estimate. Probably a little quick. I probably should allow for a little more time. Here's my estimate in the chart there in detail. And then here's how the effort breaks out compared to the trend line as well. So I've got the duration compared to the industry average, and I've got my pricing here compared to the industry average. You can see here it's a little bit lower. So if I could actually go higher on my price and still be competitive for this particular proposal. And then again, I can look at the contingency plans and say, give me the schedule and the budget that I've got a 95% chance of achieving, right? So here we are again with the effort and then with the buffer built in, right? Same with staffing, same with cost. So that pretty much, I know I'm running out of time here, that pretty much summarizes sort of how we would set our targets and how we would use the models to kind of buffer that uncertainty, right? And look at multiple scenarios, right? Using the data-driven approach. Really, in the end, if we can look at this information early before we make those early decisions, it can really help save us big time and big money. It also can help us improve our communication and negotiation capabilities when we're working with our clients and our stakeholders. So I hope today I was able to show you a little bit of how we might be able to help with those early decisions. So I will go ahead and I'll hand it back to Elizabeth now if you have any questions.
Thanks, Keith. We already have a couple questions, and I encourage you all to use the Q&A dialog box if you have any more. So I'll start with the first one we had was, I see a lot of story point projects in your example. How do you relate projects in your database with different story point size?
Great question. So I mentioned that QSM, we do a ton of research, right? So we're always studying completed project data. So we have a lot of sizing data, and we know what the relationships are typically in the industry from one sizing metric to another. So if I'm using user stories, but someone else in the company is using story points, we know what the relationship there is. We know what the typical number of story points per user story might be. Same thing with other types of sizing measures. If we're using features, if one group might be using features, somebody else in the organization might be using lines of code and waterfall, right? So we know what the typical number of lines of code per feature is in a particular application domain. So we call these gearing factors or normalization factors. So we have industry data that we can use. And of course, we have we buffer in margin for error, right? We use ranges as well that you can use when you're doing your planning. So we have industry data that reflects those relationships from sizing measure to sizing measure. But also we encourage the customer to use our tools to capture their own historical data and to capture their own sizing and see what those relationships are. We actually also offer a number of benchmark services where people will hire us to come out and help figure that kind of stuff out for them. But as part of the tools, like if you're using our tools, then a lot of that support's included. So we would actually help you as part of the tool package to set up a sizing template. And, if you had an estimate for a proposal coming up, for example, we could help you with that as part of the package.
How does the complexity of user stories affect the estimation model?
Well, it's going to affect it a lot. And so we measure complexity as well. So that gets into not only the sizing area, like, how complex are we defining a user story, but also that productivity index. What productivity index do you typically, what level of productivity do you typically work at for that particular type of application you're working on? That kind of question I could actually take offline. If you want to see some examples, we could do a demo and I could walk you through some examples. But to answer a short answer is in the sizing template, that would reflect the complexity as well as that productivity index that I've been talking about.
Does the tool generate output that can be imported into ProPricer?
Well, yeah, we don't have a push button that says ProPricer, but we bring all our information out into Excel. And I believe most of those proposal type of pricing tools work with Excel. So we would export our information to Excel, Microsoft Project. We also have a fairly robust API that we can use to integrate with most tools in the marketplace, whether they're proposal pricing types of tools or, more detailed project management types of tools.
Are there ways to correlate requirements to IU, for example, SLOC or similar?
Yes, great question. In fact, we use IUs. We call them implementation units at QSM. It's one of the measures that we use a lot in our research. And absolutely, we know. We actually publish a lot of this stuff. We know what the typical number of IUs per business requirement might be for a particular application domain. Our support team can actually help a lot there. We have sizing templates already built, right, that we can, give to our clients that have gearing factors for IUs and business requirements already set up. And if it's not, the specific requirement isn't set up for you, we can help you set it up. We can customize the template for you, with you, show you how to do it, that kind of thing.
How is change request managed or captured for future reference?
Great question. I was actually hoping somebody would ask that question. We have some of our clients deal with their change request in the estimation tool itself and just re-estimate when things change, and they update the scope and they update the productivity index and some of the other parameters. But we actually have a tool that automates all that called Slim Control, which actually provides, and I might have shown that in the early on slides, that it'll actually re-estimate when things change throughout the project. So you win the business, you're tracking, you're looking plans and actuals, and then you're actually seeing how you're doing. And then Slim Control is actually running new estimates. It's actually curve fitting to what's actually happening on the project, and it's re-estimating based on those changes. And actually my boss gave me this idea. It's actually kind of like a GPS for your software deliverable or your technology development, right? It kind of shows you where you are and where you're headed based on the actual data. So it uses these curve fitting techniques and runs projections and new estimates based on all the changes. happy to show a demo of that as well if you want to connect after this.
Can we use cosmic function points with this tool?
Yeah, absolutely, yes. That's about as straightforward as I can say it. So we have a full sizing capability, and cosmic function points is certainly one of the units that we can configure SLIM to.
Can you limit a particular person or department's access to some of the features?
Yes, actually, in our SLIM Collaborate tool, you can decide which people have access to which estimates or which projects or which closeout information. So you can set that up, correct? Yes, so yes, you can set up who you want to have access to what projects and which part of the tools that you want them to access.
Okay, so do you have any insights into story point sizing in relation to sector, industry, by digital transformation landscape, or technology? I'm wondering if this is in relation to the QSM database.
Well, let's see. The answer would be yes at a certain level, right? So we can, like if we're working with you in support and you need to know, what's the typical size measure for this type of transformation project, we can certainly go in and look at our data and try to find something similar to whatever you're working on. I mean, I would say yes at a high level. The tools themselves have trend lines and industry statistics that are built in, that we update, we keep current for you. So when you run an estimate, you'll be able to see the estimate next to an industry trend line. And that's typically broken out by application domain, whether it's engineering or business app or telecom but the support folks on our team can probably use their experience and go in and actually pull out some relevant project data based on a particular type of digital transformation. They wouldn't be able to say, okay, this is so-and-so's data, but they could say, well, this is the typical cost and schedule and productivity number for this type of transformation project. Right? Because we sign non-disclosures and all that type of thing. And so we have to keep the data at a certain level.
Do you have data on how safety requirements impact productivity? For example, DO-278 for aviation?
So we probably would not have that particular, scenario doesn't ring a bell, but we have how certain types of programs affect the quality, right? So you would say, okay, this is a certain type of DoD project. It's a weapon system or it's a command and control system, and that project typically has this level of productivity and this uses this type of size measure and typically has this schedule and this cost type of budget. But we probably would not be, there probably wouldn't be a button that said exactly what you just said, but we would get in the ballpark. Right? And then we would use those uncertain, the way that we manage that uncertain, we'd use the models to look at, okay, let's look at the 50% estimate compared to the 80% estimate, right? And then give ourselves some buffer when we're generating our estimates.
So we just have a couple more minutes. That's all the questions I have so far. I'm not sure if there's any last minute questions. But just to remind everyone, if you came in late or if you want to share this presentation with any of your colleagues, we'll have a replay available and I will send a link to that probably early next week. Also, the slides will be available for download. Once again, if you think of any questions after the fact, please feel free to contact Keith directly, or you can always contact us on our website. There's a button top of right corner of our website, so you can always contact us there and we can give you a more specific, answer to any question that you might think of. So I think that's all that we have, but thank you, Keith. You did a great job answering everyone's questions.
It's great to have so many questions, and thank you, Elizabeth. Really appreciate it. Appreciate everybody taking the time to see this. And like Elizabeth said, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out, and also happy to do some one-on-one demos or demos for your groups in particular. Yep. Thanks again, everybody.